Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. It's such a pleasure today to be here with Santa Barbara City Council member Oscar Gutierrez. How are you, Oscar?
Good. Thanks, Josh. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no, you're one of my frequent guests, and I love talking to you about, all the political stuff that's going on. And it's a really big year. It's a big week leading up to the election. So I kind of want to talk to you about the March 5th primary. We can talk about some recent Santa Barbara City Council stuff. And, it's an election year for you down in November. So we'll get there. I want to talk to you about that stuff too. So, Oscar, thank you for taking time. I want to dive right in because elections are sort of on the minds of a lot of people. Uh, what do you think of First District, Third District? I guess we'll start with the Third District because that seems to be the one that there's the most buzz around. You've got Joan Hartman running for re-election, and you have Frank Troyce, who is a Republican candidate, and then you have Janelle Osborne, mayor of Lompoc, and so will Joan win outright? Will there be a runoff? What do you think of this contest? Do you think Jones got this thing locked up, or does Frank or Janelle have a chance to push it to November?
Well, yeah, full disclosure, I did endorse Joan because I really appreciate all the effort she's done while being a supervisor.
Oh,
But considering the candidates that are running against her, the people in the third district kind of have a Neapolitan selection. We've got someone on the right, someone in the middle, and someone on the left, which is kind of like a balanced ballot for the people in the third district. I personally believe that Joan track record speaks for itself as a representative for the people. So I think that she would be the best representative for that area.
yeah.
But yeah, it from what I've heard, the inside baseball stuff, it's a bit uncomfortable that somebody that she somewhat supported in the past is running against her. That's a little awkward. But that's democracy for you. Anybody can run, and
Yeah.
anyone can try to serve their community, and yeah, so it's going to be an interesting race for sure. It already has been, and I believe that Joan will be reelected.
Yeah, I think most people agree that it's just she's the incumbent. It's really hard to beat an incumbent. And of course, she's popular, right? She's a popular incumbent. And so the only question this time was because Isla Vista voters were districted out, that's about 10,000 voters. And would that hurt her? And I think the thinking was it could have if there were a strong Republican candidate running. And I don't know, have you paid attention to Frank Troyce's campaign at all? I mean, he's raised very little money, and as you know, in these contests, you sort of if you have an opponent, you've got to raise some money. But what do you think of his candidacy? Have you heard much about him as being a choice of conservatives?
The only thing I'm worried about just in general when you have two candidates that are somewhat similar and you have a third one
Yeah.
that's kind of like the outlier, that it does increase the outlier's chances of being elected because it splits the votes of people that are like-minded for the other two candidates, which is
Sure.
kind of similar to what happened with our council mayor seat, where we had two Democrats running against each other and an independent, and that split the vote, and we got an independent mayor. So that is the only fear that I have out of that race, is that something similar like that will happen since Isla Vista is no longer part of that district. But I'm still pretty confident that Joan's gonna be able to get reelected.
Yeah, yeah, her chances are looking pretty good for sure. And she's got the Democratic Party backing her, and regardless of what you think of parties and parties being involved in nonpartisan races, it just makes such a difference when you have a team that is knocking on doors, helping you fill out your ballot, calling. It's just resources, right? And none of the other candidates can compete with that. And at the end of the day, this is a game of numbers.
Mhm.
So, let's talk to you about the first district. And Doss Williams has been sort of criticized the most I've ever seen ever in, his time here in Santa Barbara. And I've covered him since 2003. I think he was first elected to the council. And he's definitely lost some big endorsements, right? Like the Independent, that's huge, and of course, there's some other publications and stuff that have not endorsed him. We wouldn't have expected them to anyway, based on their history. And then you got like Pat McElroy, Barney Malekian, and Joyce Dudley, these other individuals who've come out against Doss, And I know he's a political ally of yours in the Democratic Party, but um, what do you think of all of this? I mean, just as someone who isn't elected peer, but also, you're a journalist too. You have this background and you still work in this field. What do you think, like pundit wise, what's happening with Doss Williams in this election?
Yeah, I think it's a interesting situation because I worked for Carpinteria City Hall for about 5 years in their television department, broadcasting all their government meetings that they were having out of their city hall. And I've gotten to know the community fairly well. And I know that Doss lives there. He lives in Carp. So he's obviously very close to that population. But I feel like what happened with the entire introduction of the cannabis industry really, upset people in that area specifically. And it's unfortunate because, I appreciated his forward thinking on something that I believe is soon going to become federally accepted and legal. And, it took a lot of bold moves by people like Doss to be able to see that, understand it, and be proactive in taking steps to benefit the community from it. And unfortunately, some people are twisting that as a negative. And I could see why it could be considered that way, considering some of the complaints I've heard and why that would inspire somebody to want to run against that, and then why that would inspire people to support somebody who's running against that. So I think it could also be in a weird way that he's just been so successful in his political career that some people kind of are wanting to have somebody else represent them and give somebody else a chance. So, Roy is somebody who is fairly well respected in the Carpinteria community, but most people in Santa Barbara that I know don't really know who he is. I know who he is because I try to keep track of almost everything political and government in our county and state. But a lot of people here have no idea who he is. So he's been putting in an effort because I've been going to a lot of events and I see him there.
Yeah.
So that in a way lets me know that he's taking it seriously, But yeah, getting those endorsements from those very powerful and influential community leaders was a bit of a surprise for me because I thought for sure that they had a good rapport with Doss. But yeah, it's stuff like this that kind of makes you re-examine certain things and certain people and why they do the things they do, and try to see if you can come to some kind of understanding and meet in the middle somewhere. But yeah, again, I endorse Doss, full disclosure. So I obviously think he would be the best representative for the area. And I think that he's gonna be okay on getting reelected, but it's tough, it's the opposition does put up a good fight, and it's good. Like, I think it's a sign of a healthy, active democracy in the community.
Yeah. You know, a lot of people, and you know, I've observed it, and the Independent wrote about it. You know, they talk about arrogance, they talk about being self-serving, and I know him really well, so I know the whole spectrum, right? And so everybody is all these things all the time, right? Some of us are more so than others. Some of us are like this in private, but not in public. Some of us are nicer in private than in public. Like everybody's imperfect and everybody has their flaws, especially people who are in the public eye. But in your interactions with him, Oscar, have you ever felt as though he was not being genuine or sincere? Have you heard that anything firsthand from people you're associated with? Because it seems like enough of a thing where it's not just like one or two people in the corner angry, because everybody has that. You know, it seems like it's a little bit more, but how would you describe your interactions with him?
He's always been responsive to me. You know, when I decided to run, he barely knew me. He knew me through my work at the TVSB, at the TV station that I worked at. But that was about it, you know. And so when I reached out to him that I was interested in serving in public office, he was really supportive and responsive. And to this day, like just recently, with the storms that hit us, the Lower West Side were hit really hard with Mission Creek running over its banks and damaging a lot of houses, to the point where one house got red tagged by the city because the foundation started to get washed away by the creek, and it's now hanging over the creek. So I reached out to DOS and I said, "Hey, can you have some of your staff that deal with the creeks or flooding come and help out?" And he responded immediately. His staff responded immediately and said that they were going to send people out to investigate it. So for me, at least, as another elected local official, he's been very responsive. He's also I've just seen the things that he'll do for the community, like his response to the Thomas fire and the debris flow. I really appreciated, and his efforts to support, you know, community nonprofits have definitely been noticed. And you know, it's interesting you say about the arrogance thing, because like I too have been, you know, kind of accused of being arrogant, and there are times where I do have to question, okay, am I coming off confident, or am I coming off arrogant? There's a difference, right? And sometimes I feel like there's a thin line between that difference, and it's difficult to navigate, because some people might see it, well, that person's very confident, or some people might see it as, what, that person's really arrogant. And yeah, I guess it just depends on your perspective and your understanding of the context of the situation that they're responding to. But I can see why certain people see it like that, because I've personally had to deal with it myself.
Yeah, yeah. And I think to be like acknowledge the like just real is your male privilege. You may not see it the way some women without power might see it, you know? And so I think that's the thing that comes up with him is if you have power, you're generally treated better. If you
Mm.
don't have power with him and you're female, you might not be treated the same way, you know, and I think that's one of the things. And so that's not to say he's guilty of that. I'm just sort of saying that's what I've heard, you know, that's what people say. And of course they talk to journalists, but you know, it is a tough thing, you know, both you and I were, you know, there are plenty of people who say, you know, we're arrogant, you know, just because we did do that. And so it is a tough thing, for sure. How would you react, Oscar, if you know you're kind of a media favorite, right? Like media likes you, I like you, Nick. You know, you always get you're like a success story, like how you came to be. And Jerry likes you, and you know, you're kind of always you know, media friendly. But how would you react like in 10 years, all of a sudden, you know, it's like you're losing endorsements and these few powerful people are coming out against you? Would you would you get angry? Would you try to work with them? Would you feel like betrayed? You know, you haven't really had to deal with that as much, but you know, as an elected official in that position, how do you handle sort of that like criticism coming from those outlets that have previously, liked you?
Man, well, with my experience in media prior to becoming elected, I understand that media has to be objective, and sometimes they're gonna call you out, whether you like it or not. And yeah, there have been times where the media has said things about me that I didn't appreciate at all. But again, with the education I've had in and my career in media, I have to sit down and digest it, and process it and be like, okay, well, like, what can I learn from what they just said, whether it's a critique or a judgment, or just flat out being being offensive. There's still positives you can take out from it. So I try to look at it as a mirror. Sometimes it's not even the way that the media covered the situation, it's the response by the people. Like, you read the comments on the post, and sometimes they're eye-opening, and I sit there and I read some of these comments, and I'm like, well, I didn't even think about that perspective, or that perspective's so skewed. Like, why did they see it that way? And it's hard, sometimes, like, especially for me, because, like, growing up on the West Side, if somebody badmouthed you, like, if you didn't respond right away, it was a sign of weakness, right? But you can't really do that in the professional world, not just in politics, but like in the professional world. If you're working somewhere and someone writes you a bad review, like, it's not necessarily a good look for you to respond right away and start talking back.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like a personal learning curve for me. And it took, some of you just kind of candidly telling me, like, hey, you don't have to respond the way that you respond, and my colleagues too, just kind of pulling me aside, being like, hey, let's take a breath before you respond, because what we have a responsibility of representing the city as a whole.
Yeah.
So if we're kind of like losing our temper and talking off the cuff too much, well, that makes the city looks bad, and it makes the people who supported you and voted for you unintentionally look bad as well. So I would just try to be as reflective as possible and receptive as possible.
Yeah.
And if I feel like there's something just too overtly disparaging or something like that, I'll try to say something in a professional manner. But yeah, I was surprised when I saw that he wasn't willing to meet with you and Jerry. I was a little surprised by that. But again, I feel like everyone has their limit, I guess, like at some point, and they need to focus on more things that they consider priorities than feeling like they have to constantly defend themselves, as opposed to just getting the work done.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's going to be fine. He's totally going to win re-election. And, I think the question is future, right? I don't think he's real concerned about this election, but other people might be thinking down the road. But I think you're a Democrat, I'm a Democrat. I think the big picture and what most Democrats want for him is to just, like, go back to the guy he was, before the Laura Capps campaign and before the cannabis thing, and all will probably be right with the world again politically for him. I wanted to ask you, Oscar, you're running. You've got a couple things going on this year. So before we talk about city council, you're running for a spot on the Democratic Central Committee, March.
Right.
So, well, I saw your name and I sort of thought, that's odd. He's on the council. Why would he want to be on the Central Committee? So can you talk about what this is all about?
Yeah, a lot of people are confused. They've actually reached out to me saying, what is this? Like, what? It's not a city council seat. It's a first district seat. Like, what does this mean? So I'm glad you asked, because the Democratic Central Committee is a group of people from all over the county that represent the interest of Democratic Party members. So the people get to elect who serves on that committee so that they have somebody to reach out to saying, hey, these Democratic Party policies is what I want to see in our community. So can you push for these? And then it'll be our job to research that, to discuss it, to see if it's fitting of our community, and then to lobby our local electeds to try to make it into policy, and also for endorsing candidates and such. So since I am an elected myself, I would obviously recuse myself of anything that has to do with my seat specifically. But when it comes to county or neighboring communities, I can definitely put my 2 cents in how I feel about these policies and ideals that we want to pursue.
So I'll put my like serious journalist hat on here. Okay. What struck me about that was like you already have a position of influence and power. Like you are elected, you're on the city council, and I just wonder, could somebody, and the thought did cross my mind, and I'm not accusing, I'm just asking the question, like, are you taking someone else's spot? Like, don't you want someone else, give somebody else an opportunity to be in that position? Because you already have a really prominent position. And so can you talk a little bit about having both roles?
Well, just going off of my experience with the DCC, there's been a lot of criticism from the community, you know, about the way they operate, about their endorsement process. And I've been hearing it from a lot of people. And I personally felt that there needed to be representation for other populations of our community that haven't really been too visible or vocal on the DCC. So I decided to put my name on the ballot so I could better address those issues, because yeah, I've heard it for long enough to see it as a concern. So
do we not have a whole lot of Latino representation on the DCC? I don't know.
Not as much, yeah, not as much as
not enough to reflect our population.
Correct. Yeah. And yeah, you know, they've come under attack for not being representative enough and not being open to outside candidates enough. So I want to make sure that that is being addressed by serving on there.
Yeah, yeah, cool. So if people who live in that district who are Democrats, they get to vote. It's not something everybody gets to vote on. So,
right. Yeah, you have to live in the first county district to be able to vote for the candidates that are on the ballot.
Right. Yeah, so that's cool. And is it a competitive seat? Are there more people running than seats?
There are 8 candidates and 7 seats. So one of us isn't going to be making it, but we'll see who that is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now let's look to November. You're up, right? You're running for re-election this year. So I guess you're gearing up for that. I mean, do you have an opponent? Have you heard anything? Will you be raising money? I mean, so with these district elections, we get more representation of the actual people who live in that district, but sometimes we don't have competitive seats. So what's it looking like this year?
So far I've heard rumors that people are talking about running against me, but no one officially has come out yet. But there's still plenty of time. I think the window to fill out the paperwork to be put on the ballot ends at the end of summer. So there's still months to go. So yeah, right now I'm still just trying to focus on working on the council and getting all that done and helping my colleagues get elected for the primary. And then I am already fundraising. I've already raised a few $1,000s and have more fundraising events and plans for later. And yeah, this will be my last term on the city council. I'll serve another 4 years until 2028, and then that'll be it, you know. So yeah, just trying to finish out my terms and hopefully get a lot of good work done for the community.
And then we got to start thinking about assembly, Senate, supervisor. Oh, I don't. You're still. I mean, you're going to be like only like 40-ish when you're done, right? Like you're going to have a lot
Yeah.
of political life left.
Well, yeah, I just turned 40, but I don't think so because if you look at who's on those seats now, they're all pretty well accomplished and really well qualified to serve on those seats, and I don't think they're terming out anytime soon.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I think if I get reelected, I would probably have to take a pretty long break if one of those seats opens up. Though you never know what happens from now, 4 years from now. But yeah, right now I'm just focusing on the city council.
And you're in the first district, so if Doss gets elected somewhere else, who knows, right?
Yeah, if that happens, but I think he's pretty well settled in that seat.
Yeah. So let's talk about your time in office, right? I feel like you're having a good time. You're everywhere, right? You're on social media everywhere, and people always say like Oscar goes to everything. Oscar really cares about the city, and so no one's ever going to accuse you of not being sincere and honest and like just direct and really loving every moment of what you do. That's a strength of yours. People know when you say something is true, and you believe it. So, are you having fun? Like, how are things going for you? It's, I write about this stuff every week. I podcast about it sometimes, and there's some dysfunction on this council. Are you having fun? How would you describe your experience?
People ask me if I'm having fun, but when I decided to run for it, I never thought it was going to be fun because like I see it as it's a community service, So like for example, if you're gonna go on a neighborhood cleanup, you don't necessarily think that's going to be fun because you're just picking up garbage, but it's necessary to make sure that the community looks good and you're helping out the environment. But you do it because it does make you feel good. It does. You do feel satisfaction knowing that you're actively doing something to better the community. But it doesn't necessarily feel fun. You're like at the end of the day, you're sweaty and tired and and carrying a lot of baggage on you, but that you're doing the right thing for the right reasons. But there are definitely fun moments for sure. Like just yesterday, I got invited to McKinley Elementary that I used to go to summer school in, and the library was awarding the students awards for doing so much reading and being reading ambassadors for the community, where they were going to actively read out to their friends and family. And that was fun, to see the little kids get excited that they're getting recognition for reading. That stuff like that is really fun, that I really get enjoyment out of. And La Cuesta High School also had me over there yesterday, and I got to speak to some of the parents and students.
Oh, yeah.
And just kind of like telling them that we elected officials are here to work for them, and they shouldn't feel like we're unattainable and we're just a block away. They could come and walk over whenever they want if they need help or looking for work or what have you. So that was fun as well. So yeah, I am having fun, definitely, but that's definitely wasn't like the motivating factor for me to take on this responsibility, but yeah, no, I am enjoying it for sure. And they're just like with anything you really care about it and you decide to get into, there's going to be hard times and good times, but overall, it's been good.
We talked about this in a previous podcast about feeling heard, being seen, being somebody who the staff takes seriously. Do you feel like it's getting better? And what I'm talking about here is we haven't had a lot of Latino representation on the council. We had at 1.3 that Kathy was not reelected. And sometimes, we have to work harder twice as hard, 3 times as hard to be noticed at the same level. Some people and their implicit biases, and I'm saying we because we're similar, in this regard, both growing up Mexican American and like we deal with a lot of these issues, right? These implicit biases. And you kind of have to like start with a deficit. People assume you're not, and then you have to prove that you are. And I know you dealt with that in your first term. And so do you feel like that's getting better? How are people interacting with you when it comes to not only just like having a seat at the table, but actually directing things and leading things and taking charge?
Yeah, definitely. I realized that it was a bit naive for me to think that everyone would know who I am just because I got elected. I definitely had to put the footwork into it, which is one of the reasons why I made it a point to show up to as many things as possible. I even show up to stuff I'm not invited to just to show up, and it's interesting to do that. But believe it or not, even to this day, just a few weeks ago, I went to this event and I walk in and somebody asked me if I was an Uber driver. Like they asked me if I was there to pick somebody up, and I'm like, no, I was invited. I'm an elected official, and they were like, oh, okay, and they just kind of like walked away, and I was like, yeah, it still happens to this day because it's so, for some people, it's so alien to see somebody like me in their circles,
Mhm.
unfortunately. And it's true, it is like that. But hopefully with me continually showing up and making a presence, it kind of opens people's eyes to an entire other population that lives here that is struggling to live here, and that there's somebody here working for them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we'll see if anyone comes forward. I've heard some rumors too, but no names. But I've heard that there may be efforts to get somebody to run against you. Sometimes political consultants want that because they make money, and so sometimes that's a thing. But whether organically there's anyone saying we need to do things differently on the west side because Oscar's not doing a good job, I haven't heard that. So I think you're in a pretty good spot there. And different than District 1, I would say. That's going to be
Right.
a competitive race. And that's no like shade on Alejandra Gutierrez at all. Just saying that there's two other people in there that are wanting to win, and that's going to make for a more competitive race. But I don't know that that's going to happen with you.
Yeah, well, we'll see because yeah, it's still early on, and yeah, you never know who's gonna come out, and it might not just be because they feel like I'm not doing a good job. They there might be ulterior motives to it, but in in the same note, I have to appreciate it because that's what makes us a free country, right? Is that anyone can speak truth to power and ask for change and try to cause that change by hopefully running a good civil campaign and election.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's one of my frustrations with district elections is that we get some people who just are automatically elected without no competition. And at large, at least you had a whole bunch of people running and the top ones made it. And I don't think it's ever fun when somebody walks into a seat with no challenger.
Right.
That's not good.
Right.
We don't want the Chiefs to be anointed the Super Bowl trophy next year just because we know they're the best. Like we want to see some games. Maybe somebody can pull something off. Maybe
Yeah, it's
can
a
do
weird
it.
in a weird note. Some it is kind of a game just like almost any field of anything. There are rules that you follow. There are strategies that you can play to that better your chances of succeeding in that. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of plays, and obviously you're very well in tune with that because you've been covering it for years, and I have too. But being on this side of it, I definitely got to see a lot of the inside baseball politics, and how it works, and it's been an interesting ride for sure.
Definitely. Speaking of, I got about 10 minutes. We got about 10 minutes left. 1300 block of State Street, that was a very interesting conversation that the council had. I just wanted to get your thoughts. You didn't really talk too much on that issue. So it was really a Jordan thing and Sneddon. I mean, a lot of others commented, but what you did vote, you know, in the majority, but what's going on? Like, why can't the council just listen to the direction from the city administrator? You guys gave her the power to do that, and now you're saying we don't like it. Like, what's the deal, Oscar, from your perspective on the 1300? Is it Opal? Is Opal pulling the strings here? Is that what's really going on?
Uh, with me in particular, with my perspective is, you know, I've been spending so much time on State Street. You can ask a lot of the business owners. They see me quite regularly. You know, I go down there, I check in on them, I ask them, you know, what we can do better and how I can help them. And I hear it from the business owners that love State Street being closed, and I hear it from business owners that don't. And I hear it from the community members that love it being closed, and I hear it from those that don't love it being closed. And when it came to the 1300 block, I just, you know, I didn't see an overall problem with the way that it's configured now. I know staff had their recommendation, but you know, I asked them, like, you know, how many injuries and or fatalities have happened, and there was none. And I know there's the mindset, well, just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything proactively to prevent it. But you know, that I feel like there's going to be a lot of major changes coming soon. So I would rather wait till those are finalized before having everyone change little things here and there, when they've already, especially business owners, have put so much into what it is now, and so many of the community members enjoy it, and it's driving so much economic support. A lot of people don't realize that, like, some of the people that work these industries depend on having those tables filled, and if they're not filled, then that makes a difference of them living here or not, you know. And it's really important when you hear the owners of those businesses say, like, I don't want to tell staff people I've been working with for years that I can't afford you anymore because we're not making enough money for you to live here, when we're having a hard time already. The businesses are having a hard time already finding employees to work for them. And then basically we're saying, oh, now we're going to change things so that you're going to lose more revenue and not be able to serve more customers. And yeah, I just couldn't support it at this moment in time. I'm not saying I'm not open to making major changes to state, but like right now, I don't think it's a good idea to change it, because, you know, I hear it from so many different demographics, you know, and one of the demographics I hear it from the most is the youth. The youth say that they like it, that they feel safer, they feel more welcome coming down there. And when I'm personally balancing the needs of the community, I have to be able to see, okay, how much time and money are we going to be investing in a certain area or project, and who in the community is going to be benefiting from that investment more? Is it the older people or the younger people? Like, in a weird way, obviously the younger people are going to have more time here to be affected by the changes we're making. Yeah. So if they're saying they're feeling safer and more supported, it's a really hard predicament that we're in. And we have to think about stuff like that. That keeps me up at night, because I'm like, okay, are these changes going to affect people here right now? Or are they going to affect the people that aren't even here yet in the future? And is it going to affect them for the better or the worse? You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of a trippy mindset to have, but we have to think like that sometimes. And I guess the best way I can coin is like generational investments. Like, we have to be able to think that way, because if we're just thinking about, oh, well, this is good for right now, we're going to set ourselves up for a disaster in the future, you know?
Yeah. I know that's all true. The only thing I would add to that based off of my reporting is the missing piece is the commercial real estate people, the people who own the buildings. I mean, because they genuinely believe and say that, and it's evidence. Like there are so many vacant stores on State Street, and they say that we can't just think about the user of State Street, the corridor, and the people who go to restaurants and the people on bikes. We have to think about who owns these buildings and these properties and how do we allow them to get tenants. And they're sort of saying like the cars will help with that. Maybe not every block, but just like, open it back up to some blocks, some blocks to cars. But I think they feel frustrated because what they're saying is all of the conversation is around the bike rider, it's about the pedestrian, and it's around the restaurant owner and the young people being able to walk and be downtown. But these people who own the buildings, if they can't get a tenant in outside of a restaurant, even restaurants fail, a lot of them, then we're going to have a State Street that is dead when it comes to activity and vibrancy of people wanting to occupy these spaces. But then, we're going to have people on their bikes being able to cruise downtown. But how is that, investment? And so I think that's what you have to deal with, and I think the commercial real estate people feel kind of left out of that decision. And we sort of see that with that CBID that the downtown organization is trying to do and, to assess themselves so that they can provide more safety or cleanliness. And they're having a hard time getting support for that because the commercial business owners are saying, what are you talking about? We need to open up State Street, So I just, you think probably, and I'm sure you talk of all the council members, I bet you talk to those people as much, if not more than anyone, because you talk to anyone. So you know these things. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. But it's very tough job, very tough position to be in. And with districts, everyone's kind of worried about their own sort of thing, for sure. But that was definitely a good meeting, and I appreciate you talking to me for the new restaurant that opened up on State Street. Cookie plug, right? That was great. Got you in there, and you like those donuts, or they're not donuts, they're cookies. Yeah.
Cookies, yeah. Yeah, no, that was great. I that was such a fun event and a good sign of some diversity in our business.
Yeah, if we could get like those kind of places on State Street, it'd be amazing because that was just like a total example of real life. Last thing as we wrap up, and I don't know, it's a little funny, but you're kind of a new celebrity couple here, Oscar. I saw on your social media, and then I asked you about it, so I'm going to ask you about it now. But you and DJ Darla Bea are a thing. You're like, was it Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez or something? You're like a celebrity couple. But I don't want to, pry too much into the personal. But you guys are in, public eye. So what's going on there? You're in a new deal, huh?
Yeah, we've known each other for years just because of my work at the TV station prior to being an elected, and then definitely more when I became an elected, and she's literally at almost every event that I go to, because she's the most voted for DJ according to the Independent. And it's funny, she teases me. We're both kind of competitive, and she'll tease me and say, I got over 10,000 votes and you only got 1,000 votes. And I'm like, all right, settle down, So yeah, we kind of have like a rapport like that every now and then. And yeah, it's a small town. We were both born and raised here. She lived on the next street over from me. She lived on Victoria and just a few blocks from me. So like she grew up going to Harding School, and she went to Santa Barbara High and La Cumbre Junior High and City College and UCSB, just like me. And she knows a lot of the same people I did, but we didn't get to know each other until just a few years ago. So yeah, we just kind of we just connected because we're everywhere all at once, and yeah, we're having a good time, and I really appreciate her. I oddly enough, she had so much political experience that she didn't really ever talk about. So it's also really cool to have somebody who's very politically minded and knows the inside baseball politics as well. Like she and her family's very politically active.
Yeah. So you have a favorite song you get her to play when you got these events, you know? You have
Oh no,
somebody to
you know,
play?
it's cool because we talk about music theory and
Oh,
music history, film theory and film history. Like we're really into that stuff, and I appreciate that. And yeah, yeah, it's great to be able to just connect with somebody with so many similar interests, even though it didn't seem like it at first, you know.
yeah. Do you have a celebrity name? Have you thought about it?
Our friends keep texting us different combinations of our names, and I don't know. There, last I heard, there was like 15 different combinations, but I don't want to list any of them.
Well, you have a great name on your own. You're just the OG, so you
Right?
can't
Yeah.
really mess that up, you know. So, well, thanks a lot, Oscar. I appreciate your time. Always really cool to talk to you because it's just always like a very real conversation. And good luck to you on the Central Committee. Good luck to you later this year. We'll be talking a lot, you know, especially if you get an opponent. So, thanks a lot for your time. Have a great day.
Thank you, Josh. And I just want to appreciate because I don't think you all our local media get enough credit for what you do, and I just want to tell you thanks, especially during the storms.
Yeah.
Like you all put yourselves out there too, away from your family and other responsibilities to make sure that the people know what's happening, and even us electeds know what's happening. So thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, we get beat up on a lot too, you know, so it's nice to hear.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Oscar. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.